Welcome to this episode of Journeys in Transformation as we look across the industry and seek out thought leaders and scale operators that are driving transformation at scale. I'm really pleased today to have with us today Paul Roma. Paul's the CEO and chairman of Ciox. Ciox is a corporation that's focused on the health information management system, and we'll hear shortly about the transformation that he and the company is driving in that field. Before we go there, Paul's, just a quick note on Paul. Paul's Chief Executive Officer at Ciox. He's chairman there. He was previously at Deloitte, where he basically led Deloitte's analytics business and built it up for them. He was a chief analytics officer. He tested many of the AI and data science platforms that were emerging at the time, and brings to us tremendous knowledge on how that industry is playing out and changing the core of what we all do today. So with that, without further ado, Paul, welcome.
Thank you, Sanjay. It's great to be here. I appreciate the time.
So I know that our viewers are very interested in hearing about transformation, but before we really get into transformation, I thought a better place to start perhaps would be one layer up. What's going on in the industry, and what are the big trends that are driving changes in the healthcare information systems? Paul, tell us about it.
Sure. Yeah, so first, just a quick note on Ciox, and then as it pertains to the industry. So Ciox is the largest exchange of clinical information in the United States. So we touch about half of the U.S. population annually. We have over 2/3 of the U.S. hospitals. And when I think about how the industry's changing and our clients are changing, there are really three big forces that are moving the market right now. Force number one is the government. So recently, the government just put forth 1,700 pages of new regulations. So the ONC as well as CMS have proposed basically direct changes to how information will be integrated, how it will flow, all pointed at making it easier for all of us to get access to clinical information and make that information very, very valuable. One example is they have expanded the core data set for information. It's called CDI, the US core data set. And within that core data set, they're making it very, very structured so that machine learning and AI very intentfully can be run on the information that is being shared. So their view, our view is that there is going to be an emerging set of componentry around how health information is going to be used in the future, in the near future, and the government's really pushing that. So the other two, just quickly, the commercial changes. There is an immense amount of money going into the health plans, the life sciences community, all around how that information is being analyzed, whether it's being analyzed for research purposes or the betterment and wellness of health plans individuals. And then the third big emerging change is with consumers. So most people have seen that Apple, Samsung, and others have really been trying to put health information as a core asset, as a core digital asset that all of us as consumers actually have on our phones, as one example. And that trend is picking up and going to play out very quickly. So those are really the three big things I think that are going to shape the market in the near future.
Wow. So Paul, I think the convergence of those three factors, the government regulations, and by the way, this is not just the US, it's across the globe. So we're seeing this consistently across all of the developing markets, if you will. And then on top of that, the commercial components of companies that operate in the system looking for efficiency, better prediction, better results. And I think you bring out the consumer, which is exactly right. We're all concerned about that piece of it. They're great sort of converging trends, but we're sitting in the middle of an industry that, should I just say, with very legacy infrastructure and very fragmented systems. And so is this really a reality? Give us a view for how realistic is this view of these things coming together and driving change and bringing together this new health information system that is going to be ready for AI and ML?
Sure. It's a great question. We've been talking about it for many years, using information better and faster, cheaper, better insights. So how real is it? The way that I see this is that any one of those components, whether it be the government, whether it be our consumer trends, can't solve it on its own, right? You actually need all of them. You use the word convergence. You need all of them coming together. I see now a very unique and timely opportunity that's coming together in the next 3 years, specifically in the next 3 years, where as I now have a core data set that the government in the US and other places is going to mandate, and I have the investments and the momentum in the market that is investing around that same core data set, and I have consumers that are asking for it, I do believe that it is a truly different picture. And if you said, why now? Those are the reasons I would give you. So I think that it is shaping up very nicely for a real, transformation, if you will, of the market to allow all of us to benefit from that health information to be analyzed by lots of different machine learning and, AI components that are going to be out there.
Makes a lot of sense. Look, I think, Paul, if I understand you correctly, what you're really saying is there's three major drivers that are driving this convergence and this evolution of where we're going to end up being with health information systems. But what's really going to enable the why now question is the notion of data as a foundation. And I think for the first time, that's going to come together in a way that it actually allows us to build capabilities on top. Does that make sense? Is that right?
Exactly right. I mean, look, what's the first thing we all do is we standardize. Without standards, you can't do it. The government provides the standards. The commercial market's going to provide all the innovations and the acceleration of investment, and the consumers need to consume, right? They need to be the ones that are taking it on, and those three components create the recipe for change. I mean, that's just the way it works.
And so what does all that do for us? So let's assume we get there. I mean, the power of analytics and that foundation of data that you talked about, give us a view of what that enables. What's the new world look like?
Yeah. So along with that trend, there are other things that are coming together. So for instance, specific to healthcare, right? Genetic analysis is coming along at the same speed. So 5 years ago, there were 70 genetic bases out of 4 billion that were journaled and understood. Today, there are 700,000. Right. So in the last 4 or 5 years, we haven't grown our knowledge by, 10x, right? It's grown by literally, 10,000x. And if I then ask myself, what's going to happen in the next 3 years, it is becoming routine that biomarkers and genetic understanding of diseases for consumers are analyzed. Our primary care doctors, whether I'm in the U.S. or in other countries, it is routine that is done, and that coupled with many other things is providing a deep understanding of the patient and the patient journey, and giving predictions on all sorts of things. 3 examples that always come to mind for me are, number one, medications. Are they safe? Are there contraindications to other medications you're taking? Are you getting the right doses, et cetera? We are becoming really good at analyzing those things ahead of time and hopefully preventing, many tens of thousands of instances where you're prescribed 2 drugs that don't work together. That's now becoming routine as one example. You take that same thing 3 years from now, and not only will they be able to predict whether you will have an allergic reaction or is there a contraindication, but it'll be taken all the way to, are you, Sanjay, getting the right dose of this particular medication based on your, your genetics? And there are over 100 medications now that there are biomarkers for that actually give you a sense for how much the dose should be for you. And as an example, one of them is blood thinners. Warfarin is an example. You have a specific biomarker, you need 10 times the amount of blood thinner if you have a stroke than if you don't. So if you're stroked and, God forbid, and you go into a hospital situation, if they know you have a particular genetic marker, they will know to give you 10 times the dose and save your life. That's one example of many. And and in 3 years from now, there will be hundreds of medications that, specific precision medicine doses will be understood on as one example of many of how things are going to shape.
Wow. I mean, Paul, you've just kind of laid out as a consumer, let alone anything else, the perfect business case for digitizing healthcare and the notion of running deep analytics and AI techniques on a foundation of data. And I think the point you've made is because of those three converging factors that are now playing out, that foundation of data is coming together. So this is really exciting. We're going to get a little deeper into this in our as we take this conversation forward. And I want to get some thoughts from you on how and what role you see yourselves playing in that game. But before I do that, I thought it'd be interesting to just take a slight break and learn a little bit more about you. And I remember meeting you for the first time right at the start of when we started serving you as a client in Atlanta at a diner. And we spoke briefly about some of your passion around racing. And I don't know if our viewers know this or not, but it'd be great to get a perspective from you on racing and how that relates to your day job.
Sure. Yeah. So avid race fan. In 1994, we won the national competition for open wheel racing. My brother and I at the University of Michigan, Formula SAE competition. I've been a great fan since then. And as I think you know, my brother is also the chief engineer at Cadillac, so it runs in the blood. My first foray into computers and advanced, frankly, analytics was doing flame propagation and finite element analysis of engines and crashes and really understanding how computers could be applied and sensors and instrumentation to racing. And as I think you guys know, racing has been at the forefront of instrumentation, real-time data instrumentation, and really driving that for many, many years. So all of the current commercial applications that we have in our cars, the cameras, the sensors, the backup, proximity cameras, et cetera, all of those innovations came out of racing. So not only am I a huge fan, it is always really interesting for me to step back and just see how that industry and entertainment, drives so much innovation into the market. So yeah, it's wonderful.
It's just great to hear that perspective. And I'm reminded of our first discussion when we met at that diner and we were starting an engagement with you and you had this vision for what you were trying to transform. And one of the conversations we had was, just like in racing, as you do digital transformation, if there aren't a few bumps in the road, you're probably not driving fast enough. And you laughed at it and you agreed it. And so I won't forget that because I think it plays out so well. Okay, let's come back. Digitizing healthcare, that's a really large, ambitious goal. There are lots of drivers for it. You painted out quite well. And there's a foundation of data that's now starting to come together. Talk to us a little bit about how you apply data science, machine learning, artificial intelligence on all of this to drive the sorts of experiences and results that you just gave us some examples of earlier.
Sure. Yeah. So I'll go back to standardization. It applies to our business and other businesses. So you really need to, organize and standardize the data in a way that allows you to, understand how to analyze it, right? I know that sounds trivial, but the first mistake for many years that I've seen in large projects is thinking that because I have I'm putting in quotes, a big data approach, that I can take lots of different things and get insights from them, and I don't really need to work on, the cleanliness and the mastering of the data. It is my strong opinion that is true for some insights, but for deep insights in, the patient's journey and other things, the first thing that we think of is really standardizing on a core set, getting that nailed down, getting the quality of that to be, there for you. And then from an application perspective, once that's there, we believe that it isn't ever one machine learning algorithm, period. There is no best machine learning, approach. So rather, developing a pipeline approach that you can plug in different modules to, right? Sometimes one, sometimes six, and you can actually create a workflow, if you will, for machine learning and AI. That I believe is the dominant approach. And what that allows you to do is really, much like the conversation we're having, you can get multiple views and bring them together for the best answer. And never really rely on just one view, because rarely in any topic is there ever just one answer that's 100% correct. And so that's kind of one way. The second way I think about it, I standardize, I create a pipeline, I apply multiple views. The next thing is to not just look at the deterministic or just the values that are there, but also look at the probabilistic approaches that have evolved. I feel in the last 3 years especially, really understanding the confidence levels that can be factored into a set of decisions, the tooling and abilities have come along, and they're there to apply. And when you apply both of those approaches to a problem, that's really the sweet spot. And so if you can standardize, create the right pipeline for multiple views, get kind of a deterministic view and a probabilistic view of your problem. We've seen it at Ciox and many other places in my journey. You get a multiplicative effect in the result. I mean, you get a great turnaround.
So this is fascinating, right? You're talking about digitizing healthcare, and you're actually taking a step back and starting with data as a foundation, the standardization, the normalization, the cleansing, and making sure that that's available. And then on top of that, you're talking about building machine learning modules. It's a modular approach. It isn't a one-time said and done. And you want to be able to cultivate multiple views and multi-dimensional analysis, both probabilistic as well as deterministic, to get a composite view, and then understand that, and then surround that with a workflow that allows for human sort of interaction to be able to sort of get that model right? And it's fascinating to hear that. It's a really good technological summary how you're approaching it. But let me just take a step back. I mean, how does that fit in the human workflow with the consumer on the other side of it? I mean, is experience, is journey? Talk to us a little bit about sort of that half of the equation.
Yeah, great summary. It's not man versus machine. It's all about man and machine. And all of our approaches are combining and augmenting and giving really giving the doctors in our case and our, and our staff the ability to make decisions. So just
love it.
I'll back up and apply it to the real world. I think I'll get at what you're asking. So the average doctor knows 15 diagnoses, right? Like they've been tested over and over again, right? So, newly out of college, they may know hundreds. A primary care doctor knows 15 diagnoses, right? The reality is what we want to do is provide them with the data to accurately diagnose hundreds of things very rapidly. So how do we do that? We do that through the structuring you talked about, the multidimensional approaches, but we also do that with learning that doctor's approach to medicine. So the feedback loop needs to be there, right? And it's never, I don't believe that we're there, and I don't believe we'll be there anytime soon, where there's truly an automated learning, meaning that the machine just picks everything up on its own. Supervisory learning, or having the doctor in this case, or the human that's interacting, really educate you on what's my model, what's my medicine that I want to see. That's really the key approach, and it strikes it where you were going. Because without that feedback loop, it's just more reports. It's just more things that are coming out that are, in my experience, either ignored or unused. So I do think that this conversation around man and machine coming together and it really accelerating how those results are taken, building the right instrumentation, building the right feedback loops, that's really how it gets applied, and ultimately, the value is created.
I love that. I mean, I think we're big believers in the same man and machine idea, and kind of the human in the loop, and sort of the future work as it relates to that. So I couldn't agree with you more. Look, we're going to sort of move into another section in a minute, but really, as I think about it, you've got this strong vision for where the industry is headed. You've got a clear mindset for how healthcare is getting digitized. And then I think what you really pointed out in this segment is talk a little bit about how you approach it from a design principles perspective. And I loved your point about data as a foundation, as a starting point, applying machine learning and workflow in the way that you just described, and using AI and ML to really solve for the core problems, then surrounding it with automation and analytics to perpetuate that. But what I loved most about your answer is using experience and journey mapping as the true north as you drive that transformation, and really keeping that as the compass for how this is getting done. And so I love that. What I'd like to do now is actually go a little deeper into the work you're doing, the work we're doing, and how all that's coming together. And really, this is going to be a little bit more about how you instrument this vision, this perspective, and these next steps you've outlined. Before I do that, I just want to kind of take a quick side question for you. My God, Paul, in this conversation and the other conversations we've had, it's always struck me that you're very thoughtful, you're very well-read, and you're up to speed on so many different areas, from the depths of random forest analysis right all the way to medical and government regulation. What do you read? What do you listen to? Give us a feel for how do you keep up with this stuff?
Yeah, the industry at times can inundate you, so keeping up is hard. A recent book that I finished was The Fourth Industrial Revolution by Charles Schwab. I think you know of it. Fascinating summary, a great summary of, I think, how these things are digitizing and how the world, many different parts of our world, many different professions, how they'll be impacted. So that's a great example. Numerous other things that I look at. I mean, I would say from a podcast and other perspective, believe it or not, I keep up actively with The Economist and things like that. And people ask me why I spend so much time on it. It's because if you follow the trends, say only in the US, you get a very small picture of the innovations that are happening in the world. And having the pleasure to have served in a business that had 87 countries and $5.5 billion of revenue in my previous role, I realized quite literally that the innovations outside of the U.S. are actually, in my opinion, going faster and deeper into healthcare. And I spent a lot of my time trying to attract those in and build on them. So, really paying attention to the global view has been very important to me in this business.
Thanks for sharing that. I mean, The Economist is obviously a fantastic publication. And I think your point about global, and even in healthcare, you think about China and sort of the machine learning work that's going on. It's a whole other discussion to be had, but a really key point you bring up. Okay, so we're going to swing back now. Folks, we talked a little bit about the transformation that's going on in the healthcare industry, the opportunity for digitizing healthcare, and the benefits it's going to bring to all of us. We then talked a little bit about, Paul was kind enough to share his perspective for how do you actually make that about and bring that about. And he talked about automation, he talked about artificial intelligence, talked about analytics, and he talked about experience. I want to actually now get one more layer deeper. I want to understand, how are you instrumenting these ideas and these design principles into something? And by the way, that something's existing in a world of legacy infrastructure. And I hope I'm not offending anyone, but a lot of this stuff's been around for a long time. And so you've got this fantastic vision and this amazing opportunity, but you're sitting in a world with lots of legacy infrastructure. And now you have to instrument these ideas into technology. Tell us a little bit about how you're approaching it and the building blocks you're using for that.
Yeah, our journey, quite literally, and you mentioned this earlier, started with putting together a map about our patients and our company and interacting with the U.S. healthcare system. We have hundreds of health plans that are customers, thousands of providers that are customers. We deal with most of the life sciences companies in the United States. And really putting that journey map together and understanding in our digital transformation, what were we trying to accomplish? So rather than just, you mentioned legacy, rather than just, automating what we had, that would be one approach. We stepped back and said, look, let's automate what we believe are the unmet needs in the market. And let's do that from a position where we can deeply understand that journey. So that was kind of step one of our design thinking, if you will. And Genpact was a great, supporter of that, both with the approach that you guys brought, as well as really helping us bring a broad set of views together on how that transformation should happen. Beyond that, once you have a good foundational understanding of, what you want to have happen, kind of begin with the end in mind, then you can start to put together the componentry and the changes. And rather than starting over, we took the approach to build from the legacy view that we had, changing the first set of componentry and then building from there. So we established as our first component an enterprise operating system, supported by, the Sequence product that you guys have. And what that product and approach allowed us to do was, from the patients and consumers, the doctors, our staff, all the way through to life sciences and health plans, everyone now knows from a workflow perspective where the requests are for information, what those requests were, how they came in. Government reporting is tracked in there because obviously this is a highly regulated business. The amount of information is recorded in there. And what we have at this foundational layer is really a digital highway with multiple exits that allows for everyone to be on the same page, right? And that has been so important for us because, we, as an example, last month, got the request for 8 million patient longitudinal views from Optum as one of many examples. And when you're getting 8 million requests in a month, that's the definition of needing a highly robust, highly scalable system that knows how to track these things. And there are, many, many different use cases that are within there, everything from payment integrity to, deep clinical expertise that are needed, risk adjustment for Medicare Advantage. And we need to be able to track all those in their own data pipeline, with their own timelines, with their own compliance activities with the government. And that first foundational piece has allowed us to do that. On top of that, we then started to add various analytics, machine learning, and automation that really started to give us that multiplicative effect I mentioned earlier. So rather than beginning with a fully automated, chain, we established a foundation that then allowed us to start automating components, start creating deeper insights and analytics, and then incrementally build from there. And it's been a great journey, and not without, as you said, it's bumps and bruises, as all things have, but we've been doing pretty well.
I don't think I could have described this any better than you did. When we think about work that we do with other clients as well, we think about experience as the true north, and it's really the starting point for a transformation. And you've sort of independently started with that objective, and it's embodied in the work we've done together. I loved your description of an operating system because this is a challenge pretty much every industry faces. There is legacy existing infrastructure, and so trying to overhaul everything, which is a really large task. The idea is to overlay that with something that is thin and quick and fast and agile and iterative. And this notion of an operating system, a digital highway, is a fantastic one. And obviously you use Coda's Sequence. Coda's our AI-enabled platform. Sequence is our service orchestration layer. And I think, as you said, we work together on human-centered workflow evolving to service orchestration, because you're talking about digital highways with services that are interacting and injecting information back and forth. And then really on top of that, building the analytics layer, the automation layer, and the machine learning and the artificial intelligence layer. It's a fantastic description of, I think, how we see digital transformation evolving, and in your case, in practice, how you implemented it. So I don't think I could have said it any better. This is so impactful. It is so exciting, and it's so wonderful to hear you talk about it. I might just leave you with one other question. How far are you on this journey, and when where do you see yourself and yourselves progressing on this?
Yeah. So we started our journey to this about 18 months ago. And it wasn't a year ago, we understood our challenge and we started with software. 9 months ago, we started with actual change and implementation. And in the last 9 months, we have rolled out to 1,700 sites and 7,000 employees. And we're operating at about 70% of our business on the new enterprise operating system that we call HealthSource. So our HealthSource, powered by Cora and Sequence, is moving millions of health records at this point and health requests quite literally on a daily basis. Just to give you a sense, there are between 10 and 20,000 ER visits that are powered by our request, in which we're actually helping doctors get information and really service the patients that are coming in. And all of that's flowing through HealthSource at this point. So in my history, this has been a very rapid transformation. It's taken a lot of patience on both sides, and we've obviously had a great partner in that transformation. And we see that the rest of the journey, brings itself to closure in the next 3 to 5 months. As most people know, it's the last ones are kind of hard to move, but we have a great line of sight and should be fully transformed, by the third quarter of this year.
Paul, you are being a little humble because we work across industries, and the speed and velocity with which you've driven transformation in your industry is just absolutely nothing short of fantastic. So kudos to you, congratulations to your team and all of the work you've done. And obviously we're excited to have played a part in it, but really look to you at the leadership that you provided. The other thing that caught my attention as you sort of said that, and I know we feel we share a little bit of that, but I'm envious of your position because a lot of this transformation actually in the end comes down to purpose, and the purpose that you're trying to drive around healthcare and better consumer health is just amazing, and that's an amazing purpose to be working towards. And we do all kinds of digital transformation, but when we find work that actually has purpose well above sort of the immediate benefits, if you will, it touches us in a very different way. So thank you for that. Thank you for the opportunity. And thank you most for taking the time and spending with us. We wish you good luck, and we look forward to the progress you're making.
Thank you. Appreciate it again.